Welcome back to Growler Garage for another exciting episode for Season 2 here. I'm here alongside producer Matt back there on the ones and twos. I'm your host, Pat. Of course, this week we're going to be talking a little bit about NASCAR. We're kind of taking a different approach this week. As you can see, no guest, but that's because I am a lifelong NASCAR fan, as Matt can attest, and he's become something of a NASCAR fan. I don't want to say because of me, but probably got sparked by me and my racing and all that.
You're solely responsible.
And Daytona 500 is coming up, here shortly, and people are starting to talk about it. And there's been a lot of rule changes again in the offseason, not so much for the Cup Series, but for the nationwide Xfinity or whatever it is now, and Camping World Truck Series. So every year it seems like NASCAR continues to just make things more complicated. They keep saying they're trying to simplify it, but they keep making it more complicated. Maybe not on a race-to-race basis, but there's just rules, more and more and more and more rules. And I'm not even talking... What's that?
The Instaphone.
Good luck. That's a bed that folds out. So
it's full of cats. It
is full of cats. I'm going to have to help you with that later, I think. So NASCAR continually makes everything more complicated. It used to be, the full season, 30, 36 races, determined a champion. It used to be the cars started as production cars. Obviously, there's good reasons why a lot of this stuff changed, but they've got to start getting back in that direction. And what I mean by that is NASCAR has effectively created a series that nobody gets emotionally invested into anymore as far as fans are concerned. It used to be that if your driver won something, it really meant a lot, and certainly win still means something, but they've managed to make them feel artificial. And what I mean by that is, think about how many times, and this has been beaten to the ground over the last few years, the late race cautions. Race after race after race. It's getting too strung out. All of a sudden, there's a late race caution. The guy who was leading doesn't pit. Everybody behind him takes 4 tires. He gets destroyed, finishes 12th or 13th. It sucks for that guy, and if you're a fan of that guy, you feel bad for him, but it's become so random that those heartbreaks are almost expected now. If your driver's dominating, you go, well, there's going to be that late race caution. I better not get too excited. It's just the nature of what NASCAR has become. And the things that I'm going to talk about really boil down to how to make NASCAR fans care again, how to make them have some sort of emotional investment, because it doesn't matter what that emotion is that the fans are feeling. They have to feel something: elation, joy, heartbreak, fear. All of those things have to come back if NASCAR is ever going to get back to what it once was. And they're on a downward slope, and that's why you see these crazy rule changes: the chase, the elimination style chase, the new caution clock in the Truck Series, which is the most asinine thing I think I've ever heard in my life.
What?
If you're not familiar with this,
is that like a shot clock in basketball?
It's very similar. So what happens is if you're not familiar with this, is in the Truck Series, they're trying a thing this year where when the leader takes the green, a 20-minute clock starts.
Okay.
As soon as that clock hits 0, a caution comes out.
Why?
To make it more predictable when a caution comes out, so that there's no more debris cautions, no phantom cautions. But
isn't the point of a caution when something has gone awry?
Exactly. A caution used to be a rare event. It used to be something that was caused by a crash that could not be cleared before the rest of the field came back by.
That's like putting a race into quarters now, like a regular sport.
Yeah, it's exactly what they're essentially doing. And
are they going to start doing halftime shows too?
Well, the Truck Series used to have a halftime break, and that was back when basically the Truck Series was meant to be the next step for the short trackers, because they couldn't afford pit crews that were fast. 20 seconds at the time. 20 seconds was a fast pit stop. That made sense in a way. You had the halftime 10-minute break. You could work on the truck a little bit, change tires, fuel it back up, and it was almost like 2 halves of the same race. In a sense, I liked that. But the Truck Series has evolved way past that now.
Yeah.
And doing these 20-minute clocks is just... It probably will never make it to the Cup Series.
I hope it doesn't. They're going to lose so many people.
They really are.
I know. People are dropping like flies.
People on the internet also don't pay much attention. So they see this caution clock thing and they think it's for everything, and they're out. They're just out.
Racing in general, they're just done.
They're right. So where I'm going to start with how I would fix NASCAR. I'm a lifelong NASCAR fan. As Matt can attest, I watched NASCAR as many days of the week as I could. Before the days of DVRs, I would record them on my VCR. I would watch Days of Thunder on days where there was no racing going on. It was an obsession for me as a kid from the time I was born. So obviously I grew up wanting to be a driver. I made my way a little bit up the ranks there, and I still continue to race for fun. So I do know a little bit about what I'm talking about. I've obviously never been at those top levels. I've never raced Cup. This is from a fan's perspective of what needs to come back, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it from, these are all things that I think realistically could be done. These are not pipe dreams. These are not, well, they need to go back to running stock vehicles again. No, that's not possible. It's never going to happen, nor should it. And it would take a huge, complete 180 of the sport to make that happen. These are things that I feel like could happen tomorrow, and it wouldn't be that dramatic of a change. It could happen relatively easily, with one exception. This one is not a pipe dream, but is more, it would take a little bit more planning. And that is my first step to this, is to make the engines production based again. If you're, let's assume for a second that Dodge comes back to the sport, just for the sake of comparison. Dodge and Chevy both have V8 engines. Let them use those V8 engines. Let them use the 5.7 Hemi and the LS-based engine that's in the Chevy SS. I would make it so that there is a displacement limit. And the reason I'm not telling you what that displacement limit is because I don't know. I don't have the dynos in front of me, and you'll understand why in a second, why the displacement limit would have to be something that would take a lot of science behind it. But somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 liters is what you would do. So you would have to make them run a stock engine block. Potentially the bore could be made a little bit bigger depending on what that displacement limit is. Make them run a stock bottom end. That's the key to this. That limits RPM dramatically.
Yeah.
Make them run a production-based cylinder head. Allow the cylinder head to be modified in any kind of crazy ways, with the exception you can't move the ports, you can't move the spark plugs, you can't move the valves. It all must stay in this exact location. Unlimited camshafts. Let them run the biggest friggin' camshaft they can find on this thing. The goal is getting 700 normally aspirated horsepower out of a 5.7 Hemi that'll last 500 miles. Should be pretty easily doable. The Chevy LS engine certainly doable. Now here's the kicker. Toyota and Ford don't have a V8 engine in the cars they run in NASCAR. They do not run a Mustang in NASCAR, nor should they be allowed to. They need to remain sedans, four-door sedans. So what does Ford run? They can run their V6 twin turbo that is in the Ford GT, that's in the Raptor, and is in the Taurus SHO. Boost will allow that V6 to get up to the horsepower that those V8s are making. Allow that to happen. If one of these companies wants to run a turbo 4-cylinder, let them do it. Additional boost for 4 cylinders over the 6 to get them up to that horsepower mark. That's how you make this interesting again. Let them try different things to see what works. Toyota, they don't have a turbocharged V6 in the Camry right now. They'll make one. I promise you. They will make a Turbo 4 or a Turbo 6 that will be something that'll be homologated for NASCAR if these rules come out. It draws interest again. It's good for the manufacturers. It's good for the fans. It's good for the sport in general. Some years, Dodge may come with something better. Some years, it might be Ford. That's the ebb and flow that needs to come back to this. It's so equal. It doesn't matter what car you run now. And they need to do their best to equalize them, but not artificially with things like air restrictors, with weight penalties. No, they need to make it so that they're all playing by the same rule book, and if you come with the better bullet, you win. The key also to this is you have to run the same engine spec all year. Meaning you can change cams, you can change the cylinder head design, all that stuff. That's fine. But if you start the season with a V8, you cannot switch to a V6 twin turbo later in the year when Ford or somebody else is beating you all season. Or what that also does, more importantly, from a cost perspective, it doesn't let you run a V6 twin turbo at the road courses and a V8 at the speedways. That isn't what you want to be doing here. It's got to be consistent the whole way. Otherwise, you're spending way too much money. Overall, production-based engines will save money for the sport. Don't go too crazy with this. Let them keep the 4 speeds that they're running. Let them keep those solid rear ends so you're not reinventing the whole wheel here. Those can change eventually. Eventually, they should go to independent rear suspension. Everything on the street is IRS. There's no reason a Cup car shouldn't be. Coilovers need to be on these cars. Trailing arms, truck arms are so outdated. Nothing has used those in years. Trucks don't even use those anymore. Get those off the cars over the next few years. But the key to this is if you just change the engines, you can let the Generation 6 chassis remain the same without having to change everything. The safety of the Gen 6 chassis is paramount. You can't be changing that. That's why you can't go back to production cars. They're just not safe enough at the speeds they're going. However, the next step to what I would do here is make it so the cars have to run production front and rear fascias on the cars.
Okay, so like a stock front clip, stock rear clip for aerodynamic purposes.
And looks and everything else. Right. It has to be completely as manufactured. You can't change a thing about it. That front plastic bumper cover and headlights has to be from that car and then attached to that chassis. If you have to run the big fender flares to get the width of the car proper, you do it. Perhaps they could allow the widening of those front fascias if necessary in order to get it to the correct width. That would be something that would take a little bit of doing, but you make those front fascias literally come from the manufacturer ready to go on those cars. And then you may be asking, well, how do you make that match up with the body on it? Easy. The bodywork needs to start coming from the manufacturers as well. These sheet metal bodies, it's time to get rid of them. They're too heavy, they take too long, they're too expensive. One-piece fiberglass bodies need to be coming from Ford, from Toyota, from Dodge, from Chevy, and then just installed on these chassis. Yes, the downside of this is there's fabricators at the shops who might lose their jobs over this. Unfortunately, if you're talking about cutting costs in racing, employees are the most expensive part of the process. And there's a lot of people that aren't going to like that I'm saying that. But if you are talking about these teams narrowing down, getting to be run more efficiently, they just have to have less staff. The upside to this is if racing in the top level in Cup Series gets to be more affordable, there will be more teams. Those people who are unfortunately let go of their jobs should have other teams to go to if the cost of the sport gets dropped by 40%. More people will be able to afford to do it. Those people can find work at those other shops. I know it's going to be a controversial thing, but these bodywork has gotten ridiculous on these cars. They've got to make it so it's just manufacturer based. Fiberglass bodies, stock rear fascia, stock front fascia from that car. Another thing that does is it keeps them from running splitters and air dams, keeps the car up in the air a little bit. More air, underneath the car means more air coming out the back. That means aero-dependent racing virtually goes away. The days of aero push, aero loose, those can effectively be over if you just make it so air goes underneath the car and comes back out. That's really what needs to happen here. The aero dependency of these cars has just become too much. The front fascias, the rear fascias, that can help. Spoiler size will be something that we'd have to play with a little bit, but the bottom line is the rear spoiler needs to be as small as possible. Cars don't have spoilers anymore on the street. They have wings. You don't want to run that stupid car tomorrow wing they had several years ago.
But why not?
It doesn't look the best. So, and cars don't run that style of wing either. Make them run what is available from the factory on those cars.
Yep.
And put limits on it so they can't come out with a crazy, Dodge Daytona style rear wing. Put it on 1,000 street cars. Now all of a sudden it's legal for NASCAR. Put some limit on it. That would be a wind tunnel thing you'd have to look at. So I don't have the answer to that. You got to look at the wind tunnel. As far as the cars are concerned, that's what I do. There's other things, skinnier tires, all that stuff, softer tires so they actually wear out. That's all stuff that's been talked to death. So we all know that needs to happen. If you get rid of downforce on these cars, make those tires softer so they wear out. It's going to be a win for everybody. Next thing I would drastically change is the schedule. The schedule has become too long. They're racing from February to November, which they have for years, but there's no off breaks in between, save for a couple weeks. So I'm not talking a massive, cut down in races. You can't have a 20 race season. That's not enough. IndyCar proves that that's not enough races. They're at 36 right now, plus 2 all-star races.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but NASCAR has the longest season of any sport, doesn't it?
They pretty much do. So 36 races, obviously some sports play hundreds of games, but like I said, there's only 2 off months. There's December and there's January, and that's it. And they're already going to be testing again here very, very soon. Actually, they already have at this point, but they've got to get this down to about 30 races again. That's where we need to be with the NASCAR schedules. 30 race season. Give them back to having Mother's Day weekend off, Easter weekend off. You can't have people watching racing on those weekends. I know they try to run Saturday night races. That's fine, but a lot of people celebrate those holidays on other days. Father's Day, yeah, crowd around the TV, watch some NASCAR, because Dad's going to be into that. Mother's Day, absolutely not. Easter, no way. You cannot be racing on those weekends. Give them a few more off weekends, get that schedule back down to 30 races. In addition to that, most tracks need to only have 1 race per year. Having these 2 races per year at these tracks is making it so the fans don't care. They're like, I don't have the money. I'm not going to go here in March. I'll just go in October when they come back. And then October rolls around and go, you know what? March is right around the corner. So let's go and we'll go to that one. And they just never go. So you've got to just make these races mean something for these fans. If you're doing that, there's certain tracks that will have 2 races per year, Daytona, Talladega, whatever. Get those to the point of where they're the bigger races. They deserve 2 races per year. That's where you got to be at for that. There's just a lot of upsides to that. More markets can have races. You can go to some of these tracks that there's no room on the schedule right now. If you make it so that most of them only have one race, you'll have room to go back and find some other tracks to go to that can easily support a cup race. The last part of that is you reschedule the schedule so that it is closer to an equal amount of track styles throughout the year. What I mean by that is road courses, short tracks, intermediates, and super speedways should all be as equally represented on the schedule as possible. That means somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 super speedways, 8 speedways, 8 road courses, 8 short tracks. Short track is something that's a mile or less. Speedway is 1 mile to 2 miles. Super speedway is 2 miles or larger. Road course is obviously a right or left-hand corner. Super speedways, you've got places like Fontana, you've got Michigan, you've got Pocono, Daytona, Talladega. All of those places can work for super speedways. That's really just, that's what needs to happen. Is they need to be equally represented on the schedule. And I mean, it's just, to me, it's just obvious that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Short track racing is what people want. Road course racing is what people want. That's just, I don't know what else to say to that.
A lot of non-fans always make the comment to me, and I'm sure you hear it all the time too. Well, I don't want to watch them just make left turns. It's boring.
Exactly. And that's, if you have more road course races, you start to eliminate that stigma.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to worry too much about that stigma because it's been there forever, but a little bit.
It wouldn't hurt.
Exactly. You got to do everything you can at this point to try to appeal to as many people as you can. And, I mean, Matt, you're obviously more of a casual fan.
Absolutely.
Do you ever have to find yourself defending NASCAR to other people when they find out that you're a NASCAR fan? Like,
yeah, absolutely. They say, "Oh, NASCAR's not a sport."
Right. Well, yeah, that's the number one thing is they're just turning left.
And then I tell them, well, how do you quantify a sport? And,
right.
Well, it's athletic. Well, okay. Do you know how good of shape the guys that are driving these cars have to be in?
Yeah, and even that,
they're pulling multiple G's going around these corners trying to hold this car that, correct me if I'm wrong, does not have power steering.
They do, but not in probably the way that you're expecting.
Yeah. So I mean, they're holding these cars going hundreds of miles an hour. It's not an easy task, and not to mention that some of the day races, the temperatures inside the cars get into the hundreds of degrees.
Oh yeah, it's you look at NASCAR and people and racing in general. People will sit there and say a Formula One driver is not an athlete, which fuck you. Like, that's ridiculous. You don't have to look at Tony Stewart. You don't got to be in amazing shape to drive a cup car at a decent level.
But you have to have some sort of endurance. Right.
Yeah. You do.
And I couldn't sit my fat ass down in one of those cars and do a race.
And it's mental toughness, just like golf is mental toughness. Chess ain't a sport, but you know what I mean. It's mental toughness.
Exactly.
And that's what it is. And that's how you fix the schedule. And then the obvious part too is get the chase out of there. Get this back to where every race matters. Get it to
it's on a driver basis. It's not points.
Yeah, it needs to be back to if you want to keep the points the kind of the same style where it's 43 to win, 42, 41, whatever, that's fine. But every race needs to be as important as the last.
Yeah, but this whole chase thing, I mean, that really took a lot of the fun out of it for me is when they started really doing this chase thing.
An insane amount for me.
It's dumb. It's like, well, okay, then it's these drivers that are basically locked in for it now, and everybody else doesn't really matter. So why are they even on the field?
Right. And it's like, if you're a fan of one of those, like I grew up a Kyle Petty fan. So my expectations were curbed every year. It was, if he can get the top 10 at the end of the year, good year.
Right.
Maybe he can win a race or two. That could happen. And I didn't care. I didn't want to be that Jeff Gordon fan, the Dale Earnhardt fan. I mean, that's fine. I had ones I rooted for over others. I rooted for Bill Elliott over, Dale Earnhardt, for example. But I was a Kyle Petty fan, and I knew what my year was going to be like every single year.
Right.
But if there was a chase, I would have stopped watching with 10 to go.
It makes it boring. I mean, because all the fans of the teams that aren't in the chase have really nothing to hope for.
Yeah.
They can see their guy run, and
we don't got to harp on it a ton. I mean, it's been done already. I mean, the chase, to me, get rid of it.
Yep.
Last couple things, just some miscellaneous stuff, and I'll kind of, as you can see, I've taken notes here. So if you see me looking at my phone, that's why. There's a lot. These are
doing some preparation.
These notes have been in my head for probably 5-6 years. So there's also talk of the charter system. I mean, I don't know enough about that to really say yes or no on that. That's basically where if you are an established team, you own a spot on the grid, meaning that you own a part of the starting field. meaning you can sell that team and make money. And if you ever decide to get out of it, you have some stake in it, you know? So that's what you do there. So, I would make it so that with the charter system in mind, I'll kind of leave that out of it because it hasn't really been finalized yet, but I would make it so the top 25 in owner points are locked into each race. The big names have got to race every weekend. If Dale Jr. doesn't make the field, you're going to have some upset people. Top 25 in owner points automatically are locked in. The rest of the spots are set in qualifying. Pretty standard stuff, pretty similar to how it's done right now. You keep the knockout qualifying. I mean, it's cool. I preferred single lap qualifying, but the knockout rounds of qualifying, it's all right. I don't see much of an issue with that. And it really just, I guess to put a point on it, you really just have to get the emotion back into racing. And NASCAR has gotten to the point where fans don't care as much about it as they probably should. So you just have to get it to where the fans, like I said, they feel happy, they feel sad, they just feel like their heart got ripped out. If their driver leads 490 miles of that race and then they blow a tire with 10 laps to go, you want to feel heartbroken.
Absolutely.
But the way it's gotten now with these late race yellows, and I already talked about this, is you almost expect it. You expect that late race debris caution, you pit, and they come out with a bad pit stop. And that, you know, if racing unfolds organically, that does happen from time to time.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but that's just it from time to time. Every race doesn't need to be decided by half a second at the end. It needs, sometimes somebody dominates, and that is the nature of it. And and I guess to put a finish on it, get NASCAR back to being organic. Make it so that the races unfold how they're supposed to unfold. Make it so that it's just how it was 20 years ago. And you'll find that the fans will start coming back. Yep. And really,
at one point NASCAR was the fastest growing sport in the world.
It was. And it was
for viewership.
And you know what ended that? Was when they started changing everything. Yep. It was only about 12 years ago that was happening. And I'm not a doomsday person. I'm not everything's bad about stuff now. Everything was so much better back then. But objectively, NASCAR was better 15 years ago.
100%.
So with that, I'll leave, I guess we'll leave it at that. And,
sounds good.
Give us your thoughts, though, in the comment section. Let us know if I'm stupid, if I'm crazy, if you agree with everything I've said. Go ahead and forward that to NASCAR. I think you can forward that to Brian France at NASCAR.com. And just let us know what you think. You know, put it in the comment section, subscribe, and we'll be back with you guys next week for I guess a nicer episode. One where I'm not ranting at you guys for 20 minutes. Yeah. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week.